Well, today I am going to break probably several rules of preaching etiquette. But will you guys allow me to be real with you today? I don't know what I would have done if you would have said no. But I have to say that this has been a really difficult week for me. I have struggled with just all of the stuff that seems to be going on in the lives of our church and the lives of our nation and in our world. I've got people within this church family that I love, and even within some of my immediate family that are still struggling with sickness and disease. I'm having to care for a family that has lost a loved one this week. I see constant division within our own country on almost every single level. We've had a natural disaster in Tennessee and in Haiti. And then we have all of the stuff going on in the Middle East. And my heart has just been breaking, just wondering, what exactly is it that I'm supposed to do in this moment? Because the darkness just seems so real, and it's hard sometimes to penetrate it. Now, with that said, we're going to continue looking at the story of David, the life of David, and we're going to be looking at chapter 18 out of 2 Samuel. And in many ways, this part of Scripture reads as a tragedy, okay? It's just filled with conflict, with division, and with pain. And I think that many of us will be able to relate to some of the things that go on within this text. And yet there's also hope, right? We get to see David's heart for the things that happen. And I think it gives us an invitation for us to move towards God the same way that David does, and also allows us to consider how we too might be a people after God's own heart. So I'm going to read to you a few verses out of chapter 18, verses 5 through 9. And then I'm going to give you a little bit of context, because I think it might be hard for you to tie this together without that context. So verse 5 begins, "Then the king, David, ordered Joab and Abishai and Ittai, saying, 'Deal gently for my sake with the young man Absalom.' And all the people heard when the king gave orders to all the commanders concerning Absalom. So the army went out into the field against Israel, and the battle was fought in the forest of Ephraim. The men of Israel were defeated there by the servants of David, and the slaughter there was great on that day, 20,000 men. The battle spread over the face of the country, and the forest claimed more victims that day than the sword. Absalom happened to meet the servants of David, and Absalom was riding his mule, and his mule went under the thick branches of a great oak, and his head got caught fast in the oak, and he was left hanging there between heaven and earth, and the mule that was under him went on." Now, most of you guys, your head's probably spinning like, what in the world did I just hear, right? All right, so let me fill you in a little bit, because again, there's been a series of events that have led to this happening. And again, some of this stems from some of the choices that David has made earlier. Okay, and so we've talked a lot about David and Bathsheba and that part of the story, but just after that, one of David's sons does something despicable to another one of David's children. Okay, and this creates a family conflict, if you will, that just ripens and creates tension throughout the entire kingdom. Okay, and so in order to get what he thinks is justice, David's son Absalom goes out and arranges to murder one of David's other sons who committed this crime against his sister. Okay? And so we have this awkward tension here, this family conflict that happens and arises in David's family, and it leads to disastrous results. Okay, and so David kind of tries to push this under the rug, this stuff that's happened between his sons. And unfortunately, what happened is Absalom, his son, usurps the throne. Okay, he goes and gains a lot of influence with the people, and he usurps David's throne, and David ends up fleeing Jerusalem. Okay, and so now this conflict has come to a head, and this is where we pick up this story with David and his servants fighting the people of Jerusalem. So David has left Jerusalem, left being the king. Absalom, his son, has taken over, and now there is a conflict as they come in and engage in war. And so, friends, again, family conflict is something that I think is very prominent, a prominent issue in our society, right? And we see numerous people in broken families, all right? And now, again, I have sympathy and empathy for those people who do not have great family experiences. I know that there are people who are divorced. There are people who have tried to and are working to blend families together, and that is no easy task. There are single parents out there who have, I think, an incredibly difficult job and responsibility to try to fill. And yet there's another group of people that seem actively trying to work against and create more division in this sphere. Okay, and I'm growing a little tired of the conflict and sort of this idea that the family, the traditional family, can be just replaced by any conglomeration or design that we think is fitting for us. But friends, the statistics are not showing that that is the case. Okay, and it's showing that it's having a profound effect on our younger generations. Okay, and so, you know, we deal in our country today with this constant division, even between the genders, right? This idea that men are just as good as women and women can do anything that men can do, and it creates this very ugly competitiveness, right? And it sort of pits us off one against the other. And friends, I think we do a disservice because I truly believe that God designed the genders to do certain things that the other cannot do. And that doesn't make them less, it just makes them different. But when you combine them, it makes a powerful unit because they provide things, especially in the rearing of children, that child needs. Okay? And so I'm concerned by this constant attack on the traditional family unit. And I wonder, how might we as a church begin to speak into that? How will we as a church support the families that are here? Now, again, the beautiful thing about family is that we're all part of one, right? Whether we like it or not, we're all part of a family, and we have the opportunity to minister to each other and to show God's love in each and every one of those situations. But friends, as I said, when we don't do that, we risk some major problems. And so let me give you some statistics. Well, I'll maybe just speak generally about them, but it's, I would say, 85 to 90% likely that most men that are in prison come from homes without a father. The rise in addictions, whether it's alcoholism, pornography, whatever, again, stems largely from homes without fathers. And I think that we do a very disservice to men when we constantly elevate women above the men, because again, they should be on equal playing fields. They both have gifts that child needs, right? Now, additionally, we're seeing increased rates of mental illness, of suicide among both genders, because people are losing hope, right? And we see this again, especially from broken families, that the rate of suicide or the attempt of suicide goes up significantly when that family structure is damaged. And so, friends, again, I think we have the opportunity here to speak into that, to provide and shed light into that, to share the message of God's love into those situations. But it also requires that we're willing to get our hands dirty, that we're willing to go and to support those people, regardless of what family looks like, and help them in their time of need. Now, it's interesting in this time of COVID because even family dynamics have changed. Even within my own family, dynamics have changed. And there's sort of this awkward nature of how do we relate to each other, even given this virus? How many of our families today tend to only offer support when there's a major need? You know, in the past, the extended family was a major support network to the nuclear family. And so you had aunts and uncles and grandmas and grandpas that came to support that family as they went along. Even in my own life, I look at the change in my family since the passing of my grandmother and grandfather. And in many ways, they were the glue that held that family together. And it's been interesting to see how our families have just kind of gone out. And maybe that's, to some degree, maybe that's natural. But at the other part, it saddens me because we're not as close as we used to be. We don't share the stories. We get together now so infrequently that it requires some major event to come up so we actually go, oh, hey, how can I support you? Or, hey, I get to talk to you for the first time in 6 months. And so, friends, we have a lot of work to do in this country in terms of helping heal our families. And that's why I love why Michelle put the Kidzillion video together for you today, because again, that's an opportunity for us to care for, to support, and to nurture the kids in our families and in our communities, because we never know what they are going through. Now, I'm going to read for you again kind of a standalone verse, and it's going to seem slightly out of place, but it speaks, and this is verse 15, it speaks of Absalom's death. And it says, then 10 young men, Joab's armor bearers, surrounded Absalom and struck him and killed him. And friends, again, this week we've witnessed just a lot of destruction. Again, whether you're looking at floods in Tennessee, whether you're looking at the destruction in Haiti, you know, it's the second time within a decade that these poor people have been hit by a major natural disaster. And what makes me sick to my stomach is often this is a time for evil to arise, right? There are people who will prey on these people that need resources and care. And specifically, my heart goes out to children who have lost loved ones. Because you know what happened the last time there was an earthquake? These traffickers basically went around and set up these false orphanages, and because they couldn't identify where these kids were, these traffickers would come up, set up these false orphanages, take the kids, and then traffic and sell them out into slavery. And so, friends, we see the evil that arises in this. And friends, we see this too, because what was David's order in the previous verses? It was to be gentle with Absalom. Despite all that he'd done, despite the fact that he killed his brother, despite the fact that he had usurped the throne, David's command to his chief of military, his chief commander, is be gentle with Absalom. And the text even says, everyone heard it. And yet, what is Joab's response? We're going to strike him down. And it destroys his relationship with David. Now, again, can we fault Joab? Because this isn't the first time he's committed murder, right? Because we remember that just a little while ago, David instructed him to commit murder and to kill Bathsheba's husband. And he followed that out. And now Joab doesn't decide to follow orders, and he goes against the king, and he commits further evil. Move me to the next slide, please. And so the next slide is, again, a picture of another source of conflict within our world, and that is the things going on in the country of Afghanistan. And friends, my heart has just been breaking for the people over there. You know, I sat on my deck last night and I thought, just listening to the sounds of the people and realizing, you know what, I can't think of a time in my life that I've ever been scared about going to bed at night. That I'd ever have to worry about being attacked or worrying about if I'll have enough food and resources for the next day, because we live in a place of amazing peace and security. I can't imagine being a parent and being willing to hand your child to someone you don't even know because you're so scared for their life. I can't imagine what it's like to be a parent of a daughter who is 10 to 12 years old, knowing that she will be physically taken from your home and sold into slavery or put in arranged marriages. I've questioned this week if I could even be a pastor, knowing that my life would be in danger every day, that this new regime that is in place would be coming door to door to seek my life and the life of my family. What would it be like for you as congregation members to live in fear that every day, just because you worship God, there are people who are out to seek your life? Friends, would we be the church? And I say this with the utmost respect, but we have really become a soft people. We do not know what it's like to have to deal with this day in and day out. And my heart breaks for these people. And I understand there's a whole lot of problems going on. The whole situation kind of stinks, right? I can't even get into that because part of me doesn't even understand it. And so to put blame on one party or the other or this or that, I can't do that because both of them had their fingers in and both of them have probably dropped the ball. But there are people now who are going to suffer and basically become collateral damage because of what's happened. And I've, along the way, have struggled because there have been times in my life I've said, why are we still over there? Why are we constantly having to do all of this nation building, and for what purpose? And yet when I see this, I realize why we're there. Because our presence protects people. And whether you agree with the politics of it or not, when there's weakness or when there's vulnerability, unfortunately, there are those people who will come in and who will take advantage of the most vulnerable people. And so that has been my struggle and my burden all week. But I did find some hope because I truly believe that God is capable of redeeming all things. God is capable of reconciling all things. And so if you look at verses 31 to 33, and I'm just going to paraphrase, but essentially a military leader comes back to David and says, you know what, David, guess what? You don't have to worry anymore. Your kingdom is fine. And David asks the commander, how is it with my son? And he says, well, guess what? Anyone who stands against you will be defeated just like this one. And what's David's response? Does he respond as a king or does he respond as a father? He responds as a father. And he basically walks above the gate and he weeps for the death of his son, despite all of the things that his son has done against him. And friends, I'm reminded of my own darkness, of my own sin, that there are times that I sin against God, and yet God weeps for that. God continually offers me a second chance and says, you know what, Josh, come back because I love you this much, and there's nothing that I cannot fix. And so, friends, I want us to remember that even in the midst of all of the darkness that is seeming to swirl around us, all of the chaos, that there is light, that there is hope, and that we need to turn to God and look at that light. And then we too need to go out and be light for the world around us, to share the gospel message of Jesus' love with each and every person, to heal the broken families, to provide resources and support for the communities that have been devastated by disasters, to reach out and find some way to support those people who have no choices, who have no freedom, and to be a light for them. Because I'll tell you what, folks, just as there are people, just as we are withdrawing troops from Afghanistan and trying to get all of our people out, there are some very strong, courageous, and bold people who are putting their life on the line and going in to support the people. And we need to be supporting them, and we need to engage and find our own courage and ways to live out the gospel and to care for our neighbor. So friends, I'm going to give you a couple of action steps this morning. The first one is obviously to be in prayer. To be in prayer for our families, for the people of natural disasters, and the people of Afghanistan. But I'm not going to ask us to stop there. Because again, this is one of the areas where we can become too comfortable as Christians in this country, and we can offer to pray for people, but we stop there and say, well, I did my part, I prayed for you. And prayer is important. I'm not saying that, but I'm going to encourage us to find some ways to take some additional steps this morning to actually put our faith into action. Because as I look at the miracles of Jesus, so many times Jesus comes up to someone and says, you know what? Do you want to get well? Do you want to do this? And that person has to take a step in faith, and then boom, the miracle happens. And so, friends, I'm going to invite us not only to pray and pray powerfully and pray without an abandon, so to speak, but I'm going to encourage us to find ways to take practical steps. And so I'm going to encourage you this week, each and every day, to do something for your family, something that will support your nuclear or your immediate family. And I'm also going to encourage you to find ways to support another family, whether that family is related to you or not. Maybe it's somebody within this church, maybe it's somebody within the community. Find a way that you can be a support and encouragement to those people. Secondly, with regards to the natural disaster in Haiti, I would recommend that if you feel led to give, that you give to UMCOR, the United Methodist Committee on Relief. They do an amazing job, are oftentimes the very first responders that are on the ground. Our church, both of our churches have supported this organization for a long time, and it's a very valuable gift of your financial resources. The third one, I'm struggling with what to do for an action step yet, because I'm not sure of an organization that I trust or that I know of that is actually doing work within Afghanistan at this time. And so I can't, in good conscience, just list an organization without doing some further research on how you might support them, because I value your time and your resources, and I would hate to point you in a direction where somebody might misuse those. And so, friends, if you know of something, if you hear of something, I would be open to investigating it. But I would ask that we, in the meantime, pray that opportunities, that doorways and pathways are open, and that we might find a way to support the people that are in Afghanistan. And with that, I again will break some preaching etiquette, and I will say, part of me is sorry for the heaviness of this topic that we discussed today. And I also thank you for allowing me to just kind of speak my heart and be real with you.